Okay. All right, well, welcome everybody to the September Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. I'm Caroline Richardson, Program Assistant at the Extension Master Gardener program. And I'm looking forward to today. We have a special guest, Rebecca Ward, who's going to talk to us about climate change. And it's great to have Rebecca back. She's been with us in the past, and her information is certainly salient. We will move on and have Matt Bertone and Mike Munster do their Be on the Lookouts or BOLOs for the month ahead. I will do the Plant These Instead feature this month, and we will wrap it all up with program announcements. But I do want to start with the most important announcement at this time for us, and that's that our Extension Master Gardener College is coming up so soon. Just a few weeks away in October, the end of October, the 27th through the 29th. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we hope you can come and join us in person at the Hunt Library on NC State's campus here in Raleigh. Along with our theme today, our theme for the conference is Gardening in a Changing Climate. The most important information for you today is to know that registration closes this Friday. So if you are thinking about coming, please get your registration in, and that's the link to register, which of course will be a live link in the follow-up email for you. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Rebecca Ward this morning. Rebecca is the Assistant State Climatologist at the North Carolina State Climate Office. And her work centers around delivering climate extension and education to a variety of audiences, and working with various sectors in the state to provide climate data and information to support decision-making. She enjoys researching all aspects of North Carolina's climate and connecting with North Carolinians on climate education. She's also currently a PhD candidate in science education at NC State, and she is researching climate change communication in North Carolina. And I know she'll tell us a little bit about that project later today. So Rebecca, I will turn it over to you. Just take a quick second to stop sharing. And there we are.
All right, let me know. Do you see the slides up? All right, great.
Yes, looks great.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here this morning. And I do, I can hear in the background, I have one of my neighbors is cutting down a tree. So hopefully this won't be distracting for anyone but me. I'm excited to talk this morning about climate change mitigation for gardeners and homeowners. And most of my talk today, this is kind of a bit different for me. Usually when I give a climate change talk, it's very science focused. There's a lot of graphs and maps and charts, but today I'm taking a different approach. I'm really trying to think about, what are the actions that we can take and how does this connect to that bigger picture of climate change? So just to get us started here, I kind of wanted to do a quick icebreaker to really understand where is everybody coming from? So if you'd like to type in the chat, when someone asks me, what can I do about climate change? I tell them, and fill in the blank. If you have something you would like to share, just trying to understand where everyone is coming from today. So let's see. So we got, all right, plant natives, improve your soil, compost, eat less meat, plant native, decrease lawn space, be informed, put more plants in the ground, rain barrels. Yes, these are all fantastic. Everyone is going to, my presentation today, I think, is not going to be new news to anyone, but hopefully it'll just kind of solidify some of these things. Use less fuel, reduce your carbon footprint, plant trees, the variety. Yes. Great. Keep these coming in. I'll keep trying to read these off as I just talk a little bit about, who I am and where I'm coming from, just so you know who I am, I guess. So I work at the State Climate Office. We're at NC State University. We're a university center, a public service center, and we really focus on 3 core areas. So we do applied climate research. If it is about North Carolina and North Carolina's climate, it is interesting to us. So, we do climate research that's not just for the sake of understanding the climate, but really trying to connect it to, well, what does that mean for growing plants? What does that mean for transportation in the future or health? So we're really applied in our research approach. We do extension education, like mentioned in the introduction. This is really a lot of what I do. So giving talks, doing climate education, really trying to help people understand about our climate. And then lastly, monitoring. So we do have a weather network of 44 weather towers across the state. We just had a new one installed this summer at Jockey's Ridge State Park in Eastern North Carolina. So we're measuring a whole host of weather parameters every single minute of every single day. And all of this is available for free on our website. All right, so that's just the quick intro about me. So jumping into today's presentation. Why should we care about mitigation? And I'm seeing some other things come into the chat that are really great. So, reducing what we're buying and reusing things, composting, voting, supporting local farmers, beef farmers, eating local meat, dealing with HOAs, yes. Elections, those levers of power, converting lawns to clover. My lawn's doing that naturally, and I love that. So I'm talking today about climate change mitigation. And so I kind of wanted to just give a very quick, high level 101, why does this matter from a science perspective? So if we think about the Earth, we have an atmosphere, and the atmosphere acts like a blanket. So our atmosphere is made up of nitrogen and oxygen and argon primarily. And then there's a teeny tiny amount of our atmosphere that is greenhouse gases. It's like 0.04% of our atmosphere is greenhouse gases. And the way, these gases, what they do is we have incoming sunlight comes through our atmosphere, hits the surface of the Earth, warms everything, and then the Earth radiates that back out to space as heat. When that radiation, these photons hit greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, those gases vibrate and they re-radiate that heat in all directions. So about half of it goes to space, but half of it comes back to the surface. So this is good. Without those greenhouse gases, we would not have life on Earth. Keeps us nice and warm and comfortable. But since the Industrial Revolution, humankind has been burning, we dug up fossilized carbon, right, in the form of oil, gas, coal, and we started burning it. So it started putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which is like putting on a thicker blanket. And so what that's doing is just preventing as much heat from escaping the Earth as would naturally. So we have, it would be our natural greenhouse effect. We're sort of balanced. We have greenhouse gases. We sort of, they're cycling through. New ones go up every year. Some come down. But now we have this enhanced greenhouse effect where we are just putting up more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And so this is really the crux when we think about climate change mitigation, is dealing with these greenhouse gases, which are very well mixed within the atmosphere, within the troposphere. And how do we eliminate them? How do we remove them? How do we stop putting new ones up? Just a quick summary of what's the impact of the warming that we've observed to date, coming from that global perspective down to the local. So as of the latest IPCC report, which came out last August, we've seen a little bit over 1 degree Celsius of warming. This number is actually a little bit higher now. It's a little more like 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming, which is equivalent to about 2 degrees Fahrenheit of warming over the globe since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Doesn't seem, 2 degrees, we can barely perceive this as humans, a 2 degree temperature difference, but across the whole globe, the globe is enormous. So this is a really large temperature change over such a very short period of time. Coming to the US, United States, since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen about a 1.2 degree Fahrenheit increase in our temperatures. And in North Carolina, we've seen about a 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in our temperatures. And even with these changes, which again might seem really small, we are already starting to see these impacts to our climate. Moving into the future, I promise this is the only graph I have in my entire presentation. Here's just one of the graphs from the North Carolina Climate Science Report and the latest National Climate Assessment, looking at how might our temperatures change here in North Carolina. So there's a lot going on this graph, but the key things I want to draw your eye to are along the x-axis here across the bottom, we have years. So we can see how our temperatures in these orange lines have varied historically. We have a lot of climate variability, you know, North Carolina. I love the saying, you know, if you don't like the weather, just wait a minute. This goes for our years too. Our years, we do really, you know, we can be really dry one year, really hot one year, and then really cool and really wet the next year. So we have that, but we do see, as I mentioned with the previous slide, you know, we are seeing an increasing trend, especially in our temperatures. The gray shaded area here, when we are doing climate studies to understand how might our climate change in the future, we run models to try to capture what is the historical climate done. And then we run those models for different types of scenarios in the futures, where those scenarios are really tied to what might humans do. So with the gray shaded area, we can see that by and large, we're pretty good at capturing what that historical climate has done. We can kind of get that envelope of temperature changes. And so then into the future, we're looking at, just on this graph, 2 different possible futures. There's many more possible futures than this. This is just kind of bracketing where we might be. So in the red, we have a future where globally humans continue to emit, you know, burn fossil fuels. We continue to emit new greenhouse gases into the atmosphere at a rate consistent with what we've done in the past. And so that red area we can see really increases in terms of our temperature change in the future. The green shaded area is a different future. That's one where we really slow. We eventually stop emitting new greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And so here, by the end of the century, depending on what humans do starting today, really will change what future we have in North Carolina. What does North Carolina look like by the end of the century? With the green future being a better future in terms of our temperature change, not quite as different of a North Carolina. Still likely to see some warming though, so we're still going to expect to see a different North Carolina than what we've experienced in the past. Quick hitting, what are some of the other types of changes and impacts that we're seeing in North Carolina and are projected to see? I'm talking at the EMGV College in October. So there I expect to go a little bit more into detail on some of these impacts and the science behind them. Here I'm just kind of hitting things quickly so I can get into some of those actions. So as I just mentioned, we're seeing warming temperatures. This isn't just happening in our averages though, we're really seeing it in our nighttime temperatures. So temperatures overnight are warming much more quickly than they are during the day. And that's projected to continue into the future. In the future, we are also projected to see more extremely hot days. So days where we're getting to be 95 degrees or warmer in the future, which can certainly have, you know, not just impacts to plants, but also people and animals. We're seeing more intense precipitation. When we warm the atmosphere, it can hold more water vapor in it. And that really favors having these really heavy, you know, downpours. And then having more time between those downpours because the atmosphere can, again, have more water vapor in it. And tied with this is more intense hurricanes. You know, following Ian right now in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, one of the things that climate change is doing is making hurricanes able to intensify much more rapidly. So we're seeing more, you know, category 3, 4s, and 5s, fewer category 1 and 2 hurricanes. In terms of the overall number of hurricanes or where those hurricanes might go, still learning, still trying to understand what's happening there, but overall our hurricanes are becoming more intense, including rainier. With the atmosphere getting warmer, that increases the demand for water, right? You know, if it's hotter outside, we have more, the atmosphere is basically thirstier, right? It's going to evaporate more from the ground. So that, all else being equal, droughts in the future are likely to be more severe than they have been in the past. With that also, you know, we don't need to have a drought to have wildfires in North Carolina, but they can certainly exacerbate them, make them more severe. And just with it getting warmer in the future, prescribed fire is one of the ways that we really manage forested land, and the days that are going to be suitable for doing prescribed burns those are going to be diminishing in the future. And then lastly, a coastal concern, we are seeing sea level rise globally and here in North Carolina. So we're seeing a lot, this is manifesting as a lot of times it's like sunny day flooding. We're seeing like saltwater intrusion in the form of like ghost forest starting to appear, losing land that we can farm in the northeastern part of the state, especially, and that's projected to continue into the future. And I see a question in the chat, so based on the chart we showed, there's no escape at this point, right? Even the best case scenario, everyone doing their part, climate change is inevitable. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, we are seeing climate change. It's unlikely, in my lifetime that we will get back to the climate that, existed when I was born, right? But what that climate change looks like is not inevitable. So we could have a really bad future, or we could have a future that is really truly habitable, where we really can prevent a lot of, habitat loss, species loss, impacts to humans. Every, 1/10 of a degree counts. So everything that we can do really truly does make a difference. So that part's not inevitable. All right, so yeah, so this brings me to that, right, what can we do? Here's, usually my talks kind of end at this point and I go, well, let's, talk about it. I gave you all the doom and gloom science, now what, right? So today I really am trying to bring more of those actions in. And I wanted to start that by thinking about what are the different types of actions. We can view them through different lenses. So we have adaptation, which is thinking about, the climate is changing. What can we do to just make ourselves more resilient to this? And this is something that, humans have been doing forever, right? We, plant trees to give us shade, to keep us cooler because it's getting warm. These are type of adaptation things, just trying to make us able to withstand what the climate's going to throw at us. Mitigation, which is really kind of where I'm trying to think about today, is actions that are really getting at that source, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. How do we stop them going into the atmosphere in the first place? How can we, maybe pull them out of the atmosphere so that they're not warming the earth as much? And then there is individual. So we can take, do things at an individual level, things that I can do, things that you can do. And then we have collective. So these are things that, many people working together, whole governments, whole societies working together to make change. Something that, one person does, right, is not going to solve climate change. But if everybody does something, that is really going to have a meaningful impact. And then if we especially get, changes to policies, such as like, legislation that was just passed by the federal government, these things can have really profound impacts. All right, and then my last slide before starting to, trying to get into some of the discussion about what things we can do, is just the things I'm going to run through are just some examples. It's not an exhaustive list. This is not meant to be prescriptive. I don't want you to come away from this going, I have to do this. These are the things that we must do. They're just types of things that we can do and why they make a difference. There is no silver bullet. It's going to really be an all of the above approach to try to solve climate change. And then, just acknowledging that we all have different capacity. We're all in different places. Something that I can do, maybe you can't do, or maybe there's things that you can do that your neighbor can't do, right? So just recognizing that we're all and have different abilities to implement the types of solutions. Okay. And I see another comment. So yeah, Bob, yes, you're right. Climate change is, the Earth's climate is going to respond to whatever is, forcing it, right? Be it increased sunlight, or changes in our orbital cycle, things that happen over very, very long time scales, or greenhouse gases like we're seeing today. And the speed of what we're dealing with today is really what's unprecedented and quite scary. So one of the biggest things when I was preparing for this and thinking about, okay, what are things that, gardeners especially can do, and, people who might, be homeowners and be able to change the landscape where they live is thinking about carbon in the soil. So this graphic I pulled from Nature, and I really like it just because it gives a quick, how do plants work to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis? How does that carbon actually end up in the soil? So we have tremendous storage potential across the globe for carbon in the soil. A lot of carbon is already stored in the soil. And so what we can think about actions at the individual level are just trying to maintain healthy soils that can continue to store carbon in them. And then there's other positive side effects of that. So one of those things, right, is composting. This graphic I pulled from the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, Illinois, which is actually doing a study to see if we increase compost and try to remove how much goes into landfill, what sort of trying to measure and quantify that impact. So estimates are that 8 to 10% of globally greenhouse gas emissions come from not consuming food. So, food waste is really big. It takes a lot to grow food in the first place. And then we package that food, and then we transport that food, and then we, keep that food cool in our refrigerators. And then if we don't eat that food and we just send it to a landfill, then it decomposes, and we have methane emissions that are going into the atmosphere from that decomposition. So if we can either, not send that, kind of rotting food to the landfill in the first place, but if we can also compost, then that can keep things out of the landfill and also build healthier soils that we can then put on our gardens. And then when we build better soils, that's the way that we can really start to incorporate more carbon into the soils. In addition to that, if we disturb our soils less, every time you disturb soil, you sort of expose the carbon that's in it to the atmosphere, and that enables it to sort of get re-released back into the atmosphere. So we can keep it kind of covered if we can grow cover crops during the off season, especially ones that really have roots that enable that carbon to get back into the soil. That can really have a positive impact on our sort of climate mitigation standpoint, keeping more carbon in the soil, but also, right, it's a healthier landscape. More water is able to infiltrate the soil because we have these really healthy root systems. We don't have compacted soil. We don't have like a crust on the top of the soil. That can really help. And then, just more nutrients in the soil as well. Another thing is thinking about reducing waste. So this can go a lot of ways. I was trying to think about it through the lens of, gardening. What does that mean? So it can be, just avoiding, if we don't need to put an input to help grow our plants, then let's not use it, right? So if we don't need to use fertilizer, well, then don't use it. If we don't need to use, plastic coverings, don't use them. Just ways that we can reduce what we're using. And then one here, this I sort of, maybe it's not really a waste thing, but thinking about rainwater, right? In the future, we're projected to have increased more severe droughts. So those time between these heavy rain events might be a little bit hotter, might be a little bit longer. And so thinking about ways that we can maintain our supply of water without having to say, go to water that's been treated, that comes from, a public water supply source. If we can just capture rainwater through rain barrels, that's a really great way to adapt to our changing climate, but also mitigation. We're dealing with not having to pump water, to treat water, to do any of those things. It's just free from the sky. Other things, so planting native plants, embracing weeds. This recommendation, the links there at the bottom, the Audubon Society has a really great post about this that I found really nice. So, right, we think about plants, right, especially your woody plants, right, they lock up carbon dioxide into them. They have all these positive benefits for local ecology. They provide food and shelter for pollinators. They're just, they're pretty to look at if we like plants, right? But the native plants are adapted to those local environmental conditions. So we're not going to need as many inputs to get them to grow, right? You might have to fertilize some sort of non-native species to get it looking healthy. But if it's a native plant, not so much. The caveat with this is, of course, I mentioned our climate is changing. So what is native and adapted to here, maybe, in 100 years, it might not do so well. But by and large, if you plant native today, it's going to be doing just fine. And And then planting a tree. So kind of, again, there's been a lot of studies looking at what's the value of afforestation, reforesting areas in terms of carbon capture and sequestration. And they're like, it's not a silver bullet, but planting a tree, if that tree reaches maturity, we're storing a lot of carbon, which is great. But we also have other benefits from a climate mitigation standpoint, right? So they can provide shade, especially if you're providing shade over like a house, right? We're not having to run our air conditioning as much. They also can absorb water if we're having, flooding issues. Trees can really help with that. They can also help stabilize the ground. And then, nice habitat for wildlife. And then again, they can be pretty to look at if you happen to like trees. I like trees. And then the last one here, which I think is really powerful and something that we don't often maybe think about, are what tools are we using to manage our landscape? So that third resource on the bottom of the slide, and I will make all these available as a PDF to folks if you'd like to go, so you don't have to jot these down. The California Air Resources Board, California tends to be kind of a, on the leading edge of transitioning to cleaner energies. So they've done a lot of work here in looking at sort of these two-stroke engines and what's their carbon emissions, as well as just in general pollutants for air quality. And lawnmowers and leaf blowers, they produce a lot of emissions. And they're not really subject to the same kind of regulations as, say, like our cars are subject to. So if we can avoid using gasoline powered tools, and that's one way to not just prevent greenhouse gas emissions, but also just emissions that might reduce our local air quality as well from getting into the atmosphere. And this is one side where especially I really wanted to say, like, not everybody, this might not be possible for everybody. I think about I grew up on a 7-acre plot, and so using a little real lawnmower like I use now for my little 1/3 of an acre yard, that wasn't really possible then, right? We had to use gas-powered lawn mowing equipment to really manage that landscape. But if it's possible for you to reduce or limit that use, that can certainly be a big way to make a contribution. And then growing our own food. So I saw some of the comments initially, like buying local beef, supporting local farmers, growing your own food. These are really huge ways to make a difference, right? We think about what it takes to grow food. And then once we start to move that food around, we're across the whole chain, we have many emissions. So, if you can buy local tomatoes, if you can grow your own tomatoes, then that's great. That's one way to not just have, in my opinion, better tasting food and more rewarding food, but also, food that is sort of cutting out a lot of emissions. If we can buy from a local farmer's market versus buying, food that's been shipped from California across the country, that can really have a positive impact in terms of climate change mitigation. This won't be possible all the time, right? But just thinking about little ways that we can do this will certainly make a difference. And then this is my last example of an action. And I think, throughout all of this is what really makes the biggest difference, is to just talk about it. So there's been some interesting studies looking at what's the actions that really lead sort of cascade, and talking about it is a big one. So across the United States, there's the Yale Program on Climate Change. They do these really interesting surveys every year to see how much of the country believes in global warming, and then sort of some other things. So as of the latest survey, 72% of US adults believe that global warming is happening. But then when we start to dive into that and say, like, well, how often are people talking about it? How often do people hear about it on the news? It's really kind of abysmal. It's, like maybe 10% of people are, thinking about it and talking about it regularly. And we talk about the things that matter to us. And when we talk about the things that matter to us, more people listen and pay attention and go explore this, especially people who are in, power, right, in the government or elected officials. So this study that I'm referencing here was looking at how does talking, like amongst your friends and family, how does that cascade? And so what the researchers found is that when, if I am talking to my family, my immediate family about global warming, well, it leads them to kind of, pay attention a little bit more because it's coming from me. And then, go learn more about it and learn, really important facts like, say, scientists agree. And that once people sort of catch on to that fact that, say scientists agree that this is happening, then they tend to go learn more about it and learn other things like, oh, okay, so this is human cause. This is something to be concerned about. And once people are more concerned about it, then they tend to talk about it more with their friends and their family. So it sort of leads to this cyclical effect where it can go onto other people's and really start to make a difference. So I would just say, if you take an action, maybe also talk about that action to somebody can also just make that connection in other people's minds about what is climate change. It's something to be concerned about, and maybe this is something that we can do something about too. All right, so I'm gonna just keeping an eye on the chat here. Yeah, so Barbara, yeah, you mentioned, it's not just in North Carolina that we need to change, the rest of the world has to change too. Yeah, this is totally correct. I'm talking today a lot about individual actions. We really do need that collective action, not just like where I live, town of Apex or, city of Raleigh or, state of North Carolina, right? We do truly need global action. But again, that's, it's an all of the above approach. If we can do things at the individual level, it's certainly not going to hurt the climate. And hopefully if we do enough and we elevate it enough in importance, then that might start to make other folks sit up and pay attention too. Carol mentioned, looking at photos of New York City around 1970 compared to now, it's a stunning change from yellow smog fog to sunny clear skies. Yeah, that's very true. And I love having clean air to breathe, right? Andrea, thank you so much for saying that my slides are pretty. Karen, great. Yes, you bought a battery powered rider. I would love to know, you say it's great. Is it a smooth ride? I'm really interested in just learning more about battery powered lawn equipment and just kind of how well it works for our next purchase for our own lawn equipment. Planting goats, sheep to eat the vegetation down to the roots and expose the soil. Yes, that can be problematic. So having, good practices when we're managing the land. In winter, put on a sweater or 3. Yes. Yep. And yeah, using synthetic fertilizers. That's nitrous oxide. That's one of the another big impact. And then Andrea also asked, where does burning wood for heat fall as far as climate change neutral and unhelpful? So when we burn wood, that is, it's not a fossil fuel, right? But we are still burning, we are still submitting emissions into the atmosphere. I'm not sure, I don't really know the numbers in terms of like if this is a big contributor or not, but it's certainly, if we're using that for heat, we are putting emissions in the atmosphere, and it's also an air quality thing. So I certainly wouldn't say don't ever burn wood in the fireplace or something like that. But I think there are probably cleaner ways to warm the air. I just have a couple of sort of resources and tools slides here that I'll quickly go through. I'm trying to make sure I'm not going over my time for anything. One I just wanted to mention is that my office, we do have a set of sort of self-paced slides to learn more about climate change in North Carolina. This again, it's all online. The idea is that you kind of can click through on your own and learn more deeply. So I would encourage you to go check it out if you're interested, and also send me feedback because these aren't. This is a living set of tutorials, so we do want to update them. The UN campaign for individual action. Just if you're interested in learning more about different types of actions. Or even, there's sort of some like accountability things there if you want to like log what you've done. That's something to take a look at too. Just a lot of links here. Again, I'll send these out so that you can explore more, but just for finding up-to-date information on climate science as well as some of those actions. Similarly, staying up to date on climate news in North Carolina. This is my shameless plug. as mentioned in the beginning, so I'm getting my PhD in science education, and I'm really interested in how people basically interact with all the graphs and charts that we use to talk about climate change. Do these make sense? Are these easy to like basically interpret? So if you're interested, I would very much love it if any of you would be willing to take this survey that I've put together. It'll basically present you with a couple of different climate change graphs, ask you what do you take away from this, sort of interpret it, and then just a kind of a couple of questions to get at, understanding what do you think about climate change. And then there's that link there too. And then that's my last slide. So there's, feel free to always get back in touch with me. There's my email address, as well as our Twitter, my office's Twitter handle. And I'm going to shamelessly go back to my survey slide if you would like to do that. So I don't know how I'm doing on time.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you. I really like your suggestions today because you mentioned them being doable and scalable. So as Master Gardener volunteers, right, we're educators and we're talking to all different kinds of people. And so by being able to share, maybe somebody can compost at home, or maybe somebody who can't can use one of those companies where you put your compost out on the curb and, help get rid of their food waste in a different manner. So, and it's great for us to know about that self-paced slide set, because that's a resource from NC State that we can share with the public as they're learning. And today's presentation, of course, is perfectly timed to encourage everyone to come to the EMG College, where really this is what we're talking about. We're talking about climate change and going into depth on things from garden design and plant selection as we move forward with the change. I hope that this got people excited and they will register. Yes, we will send out all those links, and including your survey. Thank you for those slides with all that information. And I'm looking at the chat and it looks like lots of compliments coming in. So great. Appreciate that. And we look forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll still be a beautiful fall day. I'm hopeful that we don't get like second summer coming, right?
I know. We've got several tour opportunities. So people are going out and about around Hunt Library and also a little further afield to see some things. So we do want a good weather day. I think it's Friday. We really need a good weather day.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Sounds good. And we will get ready to have Matt and his Be on the Lookouts.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much, Rebecca. That was a great talk, and thanks for all the work you do. So I'm going to go first. Hope you all can hear me. And Mike will follow me with diseases. I'm going to talk a little bit about arthropods to be on the lookout for. Let me get 1 second here. Make sure you don't see the final slide. It's really super spectacular, but all right, let's see. All right, hopefully everyone can see this.
Yes, you look good.
Great. All right, well, it is starting to get a little cool out. This morning was a little cool, which is kind of exciting, although I am not a big fan of the cold once that does come. But as the daylight starts to dwindle and the temperatures start to cool, we still do have a lot of arthropods around, but they are kind of winding down. Many arthropods will overwinter as eggs or larvae or pupae. Some will actually overwinter as adults, so you may still see them in the winter on warm days. But for now, let's do some insect, or I should say arthropod bolos for October. So basically you may see some things around still, like crickets and caterpillars and orb weavers, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But one of the things you're going to be looking out for are the home invaders. So as the days get shorter, This kind of triggers insects to start finding places to hibernate, especially those that overwinter as adults. And so you're going to start to see some home invaders, including stink bugs, like brown marmorated stink bugs in particular. In the case of all these home invaders, the best thing to do is, it's going to happen. They're trying to find places to rest and hibernate. The best thing to do is make sure you shore up all your weather stripping, all your gaps, anything like that in the home. There are ways to collect them afterwards if they come in the home. We can talk about that later if anybody has any questions. But stink bugs are probably the most common thing that people are seeing starting to come into homes. But you may also get other related bugs like kudzu bugs and box elder bugs congregating on homes and coming indoors. You may even have flies like cluster flies. There's several groups of flies that overwinter as adults, and they will maybe come into homes, oftentimes resting in attics, and that's why they're actually called cluster flies, this group of flies. Ladybugs tend to come into homes as well to overwinter. They can become a nuisance, even more so than other insects, because sometimes they can bite and leave stains and things like that. The social wasps right now are kind of getting ready to end their nests. You know, their nests have become very large, lots of members in there. They've probably produced or started to produce the males and new queens. Those will go out and mate this fall, and the males will die and the males will die, the rest of the colony will die, and the queens will hibernate, which means they may come into homes as well. So this is a time of year where you may see them entering homes looking for a space to hibernate. So again, all of these insects will be looking for a nice place to be. Unfortunately, sometimes that's your home. So again, they could be trapped and taken outside if they come indoors. There's really no chemical controls for them because there's no real target for where they're going to be and how long they're going to be there. So again, making sure the gaps in the homes are filled up, are fixed, weather strippings fixed, things like that. That can help reduce the amount of insects that get in the home at this time of year. Now you are still going to be seeing some larger arthropods hanging on. This headless male mantis is definitely hanging on still to this female. So we've got some Carolina mantids. Orb weaver spiders are still going to be out and about. They're the biggest now that they're going to get. And these are going to be the most noticeable throughout the year. Basically will die off. And next year, a new batch of them will grow throughout the year, and you won't see them really much until the fall. Some other things you might see, these are things I've noticed in the past. There's a group of march flies. This is called Penthetria, the genus. And they're very kind of velvety black flies that fly around. I've seen them a lot in October here in North Carolina, so you may see them swarming around. They are harmless and only out for a small period of time, so they can be left alone. The larvae aren't pests. They feed on decomposing matter. So just be aware that they're not a harmless fly flying around. You may also see soldier beetle larvae. Soldier beetles are these orange and black beetles you often find on flowers in late summer, early fall. The larvae are going to be velvety black, and we often see them at this time of year crawling around on driveways, sometimes entering homes. So be on the lookout for them. They are predators, so they are not harmful to humans or pets or anything like that. They can be thrown outside, or if you really hate them, you can drown them in some soapy water or something like that. We do sometimes see them in high numbers on driveways and in homes, but again, they're just a nuisance. They're not really going to be harming anything. And finally, you may even see something really weird. These giant pecan scales, here a female with two males courting her, can be maybe emerging on hickories and pecan trees. They're known from a couple other trees too, but they're little, not super small, but about an eighth of an inch to a quarter of an inch long, red scale insects that are, not harmful to the trees, but I know that this is the season they mate. And there are some other insects that are also abundant, and other arthropods that are abundant at this time of year. But as it cools down, and when we talk in October, basically you're not going to be seeing many of the insects much more after that. As the temperatures cool, the days get shorter. with some opportunistic insects kind of coming out when it warms up during the winter. But otherwise, we will see you in October for our full session, Mike and I. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike and look at the chat and see if there are any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to keep an eye out for those pecan scales. They seem like you're going to notice them if they're that red.
Yeah, they're interesting. They're they're fairly uncommon. They don't damage trees. But when you do notice them, you'll see them kind of slowly crawling around under the bark, and within a month or so they'll be gone, and you won't see them until next year. So they're just an interesting little critter. They're fairly primitive scale when it comes down to it, and you can see that's why they're so much more mobile than other scales and things like that. So yeah.
Thank you.
So I will look at the chat and answer some questions, and I'll turn it over to Mike.
So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I just to say that Matt said you'll be seeing us, but I think you might be seeing us recorded, depending on how things go, because we moved the PPP for October to accommodate the schedule for the Master Gardener College, I believe, and it landed right on top of the biennial ornamentals workshop for pathology and entomology. So you may not see us live next time. However, we will certainly prepare material for you so that you can see it in a recorded fashion. All right, let me go ahead and start my slideshow here and then share it. All right, can everybody see the Bolo quiz?
Yes, looks good.
So let me go ahead and launch. Get back over to the meeting controls here and launch a poll. So you should have seen a little, excuse me, a little poll pop up where you can put in your opinion as to whether you think these symptoms here are showing black root rot, nutrient deficiency, Phytophthora blight, or Rhizoctonia aerial blight on these Madagascar periwinkle, aka Canthoranthes roseus, aka annual vinca. And as you're doing this, let me just put in a quick plug, pun intended, for something that I don't have a slide on, which is when you are getting in your fall transplants, as with the spring ones, make sure you check for any kind of disease problems, including on the roots. So the pansies that you're putting in, I have found a number of pansies over the years that have had black root rot on them, for example. And of course, you want to make sure that your brassica transplants are free of black rot, the bacterial disease, and any other kind of diseases that you may be able to detect. So that one, of course, is being foliar. So just a quick reminder to take care as you make your plant purchases for the fall gardens. And it looks like 59 to 100% have answered. So a lot of interest today, and I'll share those results. It looks like a fairly even spread, but C being the leading answer as Phytophthora blight. Well, it turns out this is not Phytophthora blight, although that is the one we usually talk about on this particular host. It's quite common. It's one of its Achilles heels. And it could be nutritional deficiency because it's in our garden, so that isn't out of the realm of possibility. Black root rot would tend, that we see more in production in Madagascar periwinkle rather than in the landscape, but it could happen. But you would see more yellowing with that, although you can get yellowing, of course, when you've got the Phytophthora in the roots. So by, I guess, process of elimination, it must be Rhizoctonia aerial blight. And how do we differentiate that from Phytophthora? So here are a few photos of the two side by side. Rhizoctonia aerial blight, you'll notice one of the first things you notice is the leaves tend to kind of mat together. No offense, Matt, but they get stuck together by the hyphae, by the growth of the fungus. And you can see, and I hadn't noticed this until this particular instance, but when I'd seen this before, I hadn't noticed that the stems are not involved, and maybe they could be at some point, but at least initially you're not going to see the kind of stem symptoms, the browning, the darker lesions, the almost collapsing of the stems that you can get with the Phytophthora blight. So those two things taken together, the fact that the leaves mat together and the less or at least delayed perhaps involvement of the stems is going to be your clue that you're dealing with Rhizoctonia. Notice too here how it's in the lower foliage where you've got the density, you've got the humidity building up. And so that's where it's going to be happiest, fungus that is, and the plant not so much. What to do about it? Well, in this case, what I'm planning on doing is removing these, trying to do that before the big rains start, and clean up as many of the leaves that have fallen off that I can, just to try and reduce the amount of inoculant for next year. I'm not sure in terms of rotation what other things might be susceptible, so I might just go with other criteria for deciding what to put in this or these flower beds. One is pretty much annuals, and the other one's a mix of annuals and perennials. But I guess it'll be an experiment. We'll see what happens next year. So going into the bolos proper, and I'm going to just focus today on the trees and shrubs with a quick mention of turf at the end. But to start out with our trees and shrub bolos for October. In boxwoods, we want to keep our eyes out for boxwood blight and boxwood stem canker, as well as all the below ground problems that we see, Phytophthora root rot, nematodes, 3 different kinds of nematodes that are typically the ones we find on boxwood. And to differentiate the boxwood blight from the boxwood stem canker, let me see if I can throw that one out to you. I was thinking, could I pick on some? Are we allowed to like actually call someone out and ask them their? I don't think of that. Well, we'll just see in the chat here if anybody wants to say how they would tell boxwood blight, how you would diagnose it. We've talked about it in terms of 2 out of 3, I would call it. There are 3 symptoms. If you see 2 of them, then you know you've got the diagnosis. So any brave individual who wants to put those 3 into the chat.
Of course, you're challenging people to do this without Googling it on the side.
Sure, that too. Okay, Louise says boxwood blight individual stem dieback. Any other opinions? Okay, blackening of stems, lower stems. All right. Anyone else? Well, I don't have the rapid defoliation stems. Thank you, Julie. Yes, the 3 things you're looking for with boxwood blight are dark leaf spots, dark streaks on the green, otherwise green twigs, and defoliation. So I feel that if you see any 2 of those 3 in a boxwood in the landscape, then you can be pretty sure of your diagnosis. Here in the lab, we would of course look for the fungus itself. But if you see dark leaf spots, dark streaks on the green twigs, which would be the upper course twigs, and the defoliation, then that's boxwood blight. The individual stem dieback, like you see in the photograph on the left, that is going to be more typical of boxwood stem canker or boxwood dieback and or Volutella blight. So the big difference, though, is you see the yellow leaves hanging on in the case of the boxwood stem canker, whereas they fall off when you have boxwood blight. That black, someone mentioned, didn't say who, but blackening of lower stems. So it turns out that one of the things you look for with boxwood stem canker is a real dark color, a blackening of the tissue just under the bark at the base of that stem that's dying back. Now you can get darkening there at the base with Phytophthora moving up from the roots, but in this case it would be not necessarily associated with the roots. And so that one can be a little bit iffy, but at least to differentiate boxwood blight from boxwood stem canker, the main thing is yellow leaves hanging on and individual branches usually for the stem canker and the leaves falling off for the boxwood blight. Hydrangea, our next shrub of interest here. Of course, pretty much every hydrangea macrophylla in the state of North Carolina, as far as I know, is going to have some level of Cercospora leaf spot on it, and we tend to see it most in the late season like this. And it is pretty much a cosmetic issue, not to be too much concerned. I see a chat item just came in. What is the best remedy for canker? In that case, what you want to do is prune out the affected stems, go well into the clean wood, as long as that infection is not occurring, right at the soil line, in which case you're removing the whole plant essentially. But up to a certain point, you may be able to actually prune that out. I'm not sure about, since that's a fairly recent disease, I know there's some work that's been done on what fungicides can be used. I'm not sure that I would be ready to answer in terms of fungicides for the home landscape. Okay, weird stems in my hydrangeas, they're splitting open. Yeah, Jackie, if you want to send those to us by way of an image sample, we don't charge for those still in the database, then we can certainly take a look at that. Nothing comes to mind immediately as far as stem splitting, especially this time of the year. If it's something that went way back to the spring, early summer, then one thought would be cold injury, either a early frost or a late freeze in the spring. Hydrangea, Cercospora leaf spot, Indian hawthorn, Entomosporium leaf spot, very common, and you'll notice they usually very red spots. You can get some reddening later, and the leaves dropping off. This is, of course, a perennial issue in our susceptible cultivars. So one of the main ways to deal with that is to only plant less susceptible cultivars of Indian hawthorn. With rose, the armillaria root rot, of course, can be a problem. Haven't seen too much of that lately in rose. Rose rosette disease everywhere, so you'll be seeing that quite commonly. And now is pretty much any time of year really is time to be looking out for that. We'll be getting toward the end of the black spot and Cercospora leaf spot seasons. Those are similar to one another in that they cause dark spots and yellowing and leaf drop. But the spots on black spot, they're darker and they have kind of a feathered margin to them, whereas Cercospora is more of a brown color and has a more well-defined margin. Continuing with our trees and shrubs, now moving actually into the trees. Many hosts, actually shrubs as well, many hosts will be things that can get Phytophthora and armillaria root rots, which even though they're damaged could go back a ways, it can be the symptoms can show up at pretty much any time of year. So always be aware of the possibility of root problems on your trees and shrubs. Powdery mildew time, fall is a great season for powdery mildew on many trees, many herbaceous perennials as well. And of course, these are not anything to really be concerned about, a cosmetic issue essentially, although there can be some slight impediments to plant growth in certain cases, like thinking of, for example, small dogwoods. With our oaks, bacterial leaf scorch, we could still be seeing trees looking like they're going early into their fall color, Tubacia leaf spot as well, and the root and bud rot caused by Pseudoinonotus striatus, a wood rotting fungus that we'll start seeing this time of year, the fresh fruiting bodies. They look first like loaves of bread that have the little droplets on them in the morning. That's why it's called the weeping polypore. Of course, the damage has been going on all along, but this is just the season where we'll be seeing the fruiting bodies. And the symptom that you see on this, or can see, is that the tree comes down in a storm. So it's something you definitely want to be aware of if you start seeing these around the base of your oak trees. Mostly we see it on oaks. I think I saw it on a maple last week, the week before. And willow oaks particularly seem to have a lot of it. With arborvitaes, a lot of consternation in the fall that the arborvitae seem to be losing their needles, browning and dropping of older needles, but this is just part of the natural process, just like we see with our deciduous trees. As I've often said, evergreens doesn't mean that the individual needles are immortal, so they will eventually be shed by the tree and replaced, of course, by the new growth, hopefully. When you start seeing the needles browning on this year's or last year's needles, then that's something to start being concerned about. Some of arborvitae's relatives will also do this too. So you may see this on Chamaecyparis, you may see it on Leyland cypress, but it seems like arborvitae is the one where we get all the questions about. For those in the mountains, Rosalinea blight on hemlock. And we saw this, I forget if it was last year or the year before, we had several instances of it after being quiet for many, many years. And you can see the photo from Cindy there, how the needles on the tree are blighting like that and hanging on, and then there's small black fruiting bodies that you will see if you look closely. Compare that to spruce with Rhizosphaera needlecast, that would be mountains in Piedmont, where the lower foliage is actually dropping off of the tree. So you see these lower branches going bare, and that's one of the things you would be suspecting. In that case would be Rhizosphaera needlecast. As I was putting the bolos together, it occurred to me that there was kind of a theme here running through some of them, and I'm going to call that off and on. That some diseases are characterized by the premature loss of foliage, where others are having the leaves yellow, brown, dead, even still hanging on to the plant. So I made this little table quickly. Some of those that we've been talking about and a few others as well. But the Madagascar periwinkle, both the Phytophthora blight and the Rhizoctonia blight have the leaves hanging on, but with the Rhizoctonia, again, they're stuck together by that growth of the fungus. The Cercospora and Coronespa leaf spots on hydrangea don't seem to cause defoliation, or at least not that I remember seeing, unless they get really severe, maybe on the lower leaves. With boxwood, again, the boxwood blight, the leaves falling off versus boxwood stem canker and Voliatella blight, the leaves hanging on. With rose, both black spot and Cercospora leaf spot lead to leaves falling off, but with rose rosette, of course, the virus, or with Armillaria root rot, where actually the whole plant wilts and dies, then those leaves hang on. So they don't form the abscission layer, the shrub dies and the leaves will remain on them. A difference between Rhizosphaera needlecast of spruce and Rosalinea blight of hemlock, there, of course, one where the needles fall off, the other they stay on, and needles falling off on arborvitae and some related trees. With Tubacia leaf spot on oak, you can sometimes get leaves dropping off prematurely, whereas with bacterial leaf scorch, they just hang on. So they get fall color and it just hangs on, even though it's only July or August. And I didn't show a slide of this time, but shot hole on ornamental cherries, or cherry leaf spot as well, which we don't seem to see very much, but the shot hole on the ornamental cherry will cause premature leaf drop as well. And I'll close with the turf grass bolos, which is not my area of expertise, but some information that I had put together, provided really by Lee Butler, and just quickly a few of the ones that you could be looking for. Fairy ring on all turf grasses any time of year. Large patch which is a fungal disease of the warm season grasses now that the cool weather is stressing them. Leaf spot caused by the fungi Bipolaris and Drexlera on the bluegrass and Bermuda grass. Rare, unusual disease on the Kentucky bluegrass, fescue, and ryegrass in, I believe, only the mountains, called red thread, where there's sort of a sclerotium there, a stringy sclerotium that's formed there in the turf. Rust on a number of different grasses. You can see the picture there in the lower right, and a disease called yellow patch, which can get on fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and ryegrass. And those, at least as you see in this photograph here from turf files, those look like rings as well. So, but fairy ring would be a different phenomenon. And I'll just close with a reminder that if you want more bolos, so I, for example, skipped the perennials, the annuals, and the vegetables this month. But if you want to go and look up what things to be on the lookout for there, we have on our website the link to the bolos. And I will
Thank you,
stop
Mike.
sharing and see if we have any questions in the chat.
I love the new chart, the on and off. That's very helpful. That bolo
Thank you. I'm
theme.
glad. I'm glad
I think we'll reverse that. Looks like there's just a question in the chat about root knot nematode. I'll let you take a look at that one. Take a look at a couple things while I get
see
ready.
the first, there was one about Tubacia. First, there was one from Matt there about fire ants. How likely is it that Tubacia leaf spot would appear on a sourwood tree? That would not be likely. I'm not aware of that being susceptible. Of course, with sourwood, the big thing we see this time of year are those the webbing there of the what is it, Matt? Fall webworms?
Yeah, this time of year, fall webworms.
This year had severe root knot nematode. Thomas Packer here. This year had severe root knot nematode problem in my small vegetable garden, particularly with cucumbers. Aside from undertaking certain cultural methods, I am unable to find chemical nematicide available to residential gardeners. I am trying saponins of Quayaha, saponaria solution for the bark of South American tree. Are you familiar with whether this non-chemical and thus infected? I am not familiar with that one at all. And even though it's natural, I mean, we're saying it's non-chemical, but if it's an extract from a tree, then it is going to be a chemical compound of some kind, presumably less harmful to people in the environment. But I'm not familiar with that one. No. And yes, yeah, cultural methods and the dense planting of marigolds, there are some of the things that you want to do. So, oops, I messed up. I lost the view of the chat.
Mike, I'm going to let you take a little bit more time with that. I'm going to move us on just in the interest of time to get our Plant These Instead feature done and our announcements. So if you would keep an eye on that chat, I'd appreciate it.
All right. And I can answer via chat as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so we are going to move on then to our Plant These Instead feature for this month. And the recent heat of August and September, really, coupled with all that lack of rain, at least here in the Piedmont, it got us thinking about annuals and which ones have been the true survivors and performers. Rebecca's talk on adapting our gardening practices, of course, it challenges us to make better choices in terms of demanding less water and needing less inputs when we choose our plants, and that includes annuals. So this month, we're going to share a couple of strong performers with you, for you to consider for next year, and really to give you a little bit more bang for your buck if we're going to be having some tough conditions like we are. So starting with Joseph's Coat. This is an annual chosen for really its strong foliage color. There are two species of Alternanthera, Fucoidea and dentata. And both of these offer variety in terms of that beautiful foliage. The common name Joseph's coat is referring to the biblical reference of Joseph's coat of many colors. Now, this is an evergreen perennial in zones 10 and above, but here we're growing it as an annual. It's not hardy in our winters. Really proven to be a tough performer for its striking foliage. All right. Now, in particular, I have seen this Joseph's coat, which is the Alternanthera fucoidea True Yellow is the cultivar. I have seen this one really perform this year, and it's really a chartreuse color. It adds a lot of pop to the landscape. Here it is in a median island that has had no irrigation. I do notice that at times, though, Alternanthera can be confused with coleus, especially if you're looking at it from a distance, but it is much more drought tolerant than coleus. On the right-hand side, that's a cultivar called Purple Prince, and it gives us that burgundy colored leaf that's such a good contrast in our gardens. And Alternanthera grows well in both sun and shade, partial shade, but the colors are going to be more intense in full sun. And you can pinch it back if you wanted to keep it tight, if it's at the edge of a border, or you can let it grow and it will be a little bit more sprawling, which is sometimes what we're looking for in a container. And many cultivars to choose from that vary in shades of red and copper and purple, and also in varying heights. So keep that in mind. All right, moving on to more of a filler type annual that's shown tolerance to heat and drought. I wanted to talk about a series of euphorbia hybrids. Now, as with Alternanthera, euphorbia is a perennial in planting zones 10 and above, but it's going to be tender here, so we're treating it as annuals. And as a bedding plant, it has generally a mounding habit, but because of its real delicate nature, it fills in well between plants. Now, a typical feature of euphorbias is that the flowers are usually very tiny, nondescript, but it's the bracts surrounding the individual flowers that can be more showy. As you can see, it's part of the Diamond series here. Diamond Frost is the cultivar, and it has a really showy white bracts. This is a sterile hybrid series. So the plant is not spending time on making seeds. It's really concentrating its energy into constant flowering. So it's a great annual for that. And as a bonus, it is rabbit and deer resistant. And that's typical of euphorbias because they exude a milky sap from their stems, and the rabbits and deer don't care for that too much. Now, in addition to the Diamond series of euphorbia, we've also got a series out there called Breathless. And the Diamond series is 12 to 20 inches tall, whereas the Breathless series is a little more compact, more like 8 to 12 inches high. Both of them having, say, a 24 inch spread. I think a particularly lovely cultivar here is called Breathless Blush, and it's got burgundy tinged leaves and kind of a pink flushed flower. All right, and now lastly, for kind of a thriller, when you think about that concept of a filler and a spiller and a thriller, thinking about an annual that just doesn't stop flowering. Now, we're very familiar with the traditional single-stemmed zinnias, Zinnia elegans, but really for this increased tolerance of drought and heat, Zinnia angustifolia is a better choice. It's a great performer, known as creeping zinnia or Mexican zinnia. It's much more multi-stemmed and bushy in habit, and it will really fill an area as you kind of want your annuals to do. It's a constant bloomer, and and resistant to powdery mildew, which is a wonderful feature in a zinnia. And something fun about zinnias is, of course, that they have a distinct morphological feature. They have sessile clasping leaves. Of course, a sessile leaf is a leaf whose blade is attached directly to the stem. It has no petiole, no stalk that joins the leaf to the stem. And a clasping leaf means that the base of the leaf is wrapping around or clasping that stem. So to compare, if you look at these images, you've got the Zinnia elegans leaves, which are broad and ovate to elliptic in shape. But if you look at the Zinnia angustifolia leaves, much more narrow, linear in shape. And both, of course, have opposite leaf arrangement. Now, a lot of us are growing Zinnia elegans from seed, but Zinnia angustifolia is also available and easy to start from seed. And it gives you a much bushier plant, little more, much more flowering and drought tolerance. The Crystal series, which is pictured here, it offers orange, white, and yellow. And I'm seeing that seed mix is often sold as a mix with all three colors. But more recently, there's a cultivar named Star Orange and Star White, very similar in appearance to these. And they were evaluated right here at the NC State bedding plant trials at the Ralston Arboretum. They were evaluated in 2018, 2019, and 2020 and received excellent rating for its resistance to Phytophthora, which Mike mentioned is a common cause of root and crown rot that can hit some of those annuals very hard, like the annual vinca. There's also an interesting hybrid between Zinnia elegans and Zinnia angustifolia, and that is called the Profusion series. You may also be familiar with a similar hybrid series called the Zahara series. And you can see the leaf is a bit of a compromise between that broad leaf of Zinnia elegans and the narrow leaf of angustifolia. This cultivar Profusion is a dense, many-flowered little plant. It's got some great color options, and it even offers, this series even offers double-petaled blooms. You can see that here in the Zinnia Profusion Double Cherry. Again, this series has proven to be a good performer at the NC State bedding plant trials. In summer 2021, they grew both Profusion Red and Profusion Red-Yellow bicolor, and those received very high ratings. Well, there are a lot more that we have time for today, but I encourage you to take a look at these slides and some other species that are tougher performers in this heat and drought. And as always, you can do a custom search on the plant toolbox. So you want to use the Find a Plant feature. And what I did was search by plant type, annual. I put in drought as the resistance to a challenge that I was looking for, full sun, and I put in attracts pollinators. And with that search, I got 30 plants, and some of them are the ones I featured today. Zinnia angustifolia came up, Gomphrena globosa, Tithonia, and many that you'll be familiar with. Let's take a look there, as well as checking out all our past Plant These Instead features by going to the Plant These Instead archive. All right, I'll shift gears and start some announcements. I'm putting this up one more time, encouraging you to join us soon at the Extension Master Gardener College. Registration closes on this Friday. There are some new online plant ID classes that are starting on October 10th, and you have the option to enroll in actually an instructor-led course or to do the course at your own pace in a self-study module. So check those out. The next therapeutic horticulture course is starting on October 17th. This is the next course in the series of those classes. Always encourage you to keep an eye out for the programs that are happening at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. And as I think Mike referred to, yes, we have moved Plants, Pests, and Pathogens up 1 week for October. So it will be on October 18th, and that's because we're going to be all together at the EMG College the last Thursday in October, the 4th Thursday, which is when we usually have it. So we will wrap up the season. This will be our wrap up for 2022, and Matt and Mike will share with us current pest and disease issues and do a little bit of reflection on the past year. So we hope you will join us then. And that takes us through. So we're very pleased that you join us today, and we hope we can see you in person soon and share some time together at the Extension Master Gardener College.
Let me just chime in for one quick second here.
Great.
I put this in the chat, but have an early lunch here and eat some crow. I see that Tubacia is reported on Oxydendrum, on sourwood, but I have never seen it, and we don't have any record of it in the clinic here for the last 15 years or so. But I did see a record of us having a Pseudocercospora leaf spot on it. So insufficient data really to answer that one. It's almost one that we'd have to have a physical sample to really diagnose.
Okay, thank you. All right, we thank you, everyone, and we wish you a safe weekend with Ian and wherever you and your loved ones are, and we pray for a healthy amount of rain.
Amen. Have a good month, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt and Mike.
Yeah,
and
thanks,
Rebecca,
everyone.
you're still with us. Thank you.
All right.